First question. What's the point in trying when you could die any minute? What's the point in trying when you could die any minute? Let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. We'll look at some passages related to this question when we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, we deal with this question. The book of Ecclesiastes is written by someone called the Teacher, who looks at the world with a skeptic's point of view. The Teacher, of course, is called the son of David in verse 1, king of Jerusalem, so this would be Solomon. And he continues to outline the idea of what's empty in life. He says that there's a limitation to wisdom, which is interesting considering that Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs as well as the Song of Solomon. And then here he deals with things that can keep us empty or make us empty, and that includes pleasure and possessions, work. And then in chapter 3, starting in verse 1, he says, there is an occasion for everything and a time for every activity under heaven. A time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing, a time to search and a time to count as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So this section talks about the importance of time in life. And as we address the idea of what's the point of trying or what's the point of going on in life, Solomon is reminding us that there's a time for everything in our lives. And if we continue, it says in verse 9, what does the worker gain from his struggles? The point being that just like this question that's being asked, continuing to try, there are people who just struggle in life. And he prefaces this by saying there's a time for everything in life. And even though there's struggles, look in verse 10. I have seen the task that God has given people to keep them occupied. He has made everything appropriate in his time. And in this particular case, the idea being, has put a sense of past and future into their minds. And so he's put the idea that there's everything is appropriate in their time, and then he has put eternity in their hearts, but man cannot discover the work God has done from beginning to end. God has instilled in us the idea that there is more to life than just this life. And as a result of that, there is purpose in this life. That if we live this life, then he says in verse 12, because there is a life after this life, I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. I know that all God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. God works so that people will be in awe of him. Whatever is, has been already been, and whatever will be already is, God repeats what is past. The point being here is there is life beyond this life. There is purpose to what you're doing today. And as a result of that, we need to enjoy the life we have. We don't want to embrace this negative, skeptical view of life that says, what's the point of it all? The point of it all is to enjoy God. The point of it all is to follow God and keep his commands because they benefit us in the end. They benefit me not just for the long term in eternity, but they also benefit me in this life. And if we continue in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, if you turn with me there, you'll see that it says in chapter 12, verse 1, so remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And then he continues in this diatribe, if you will, this continual rant almost, starting in verse 1, before the days of adversity come and the years approach when you will say. So he's saying, enjoy God now when you're young, because as you get older, it's going to get tougher. That's what he's basically saying. Okay, he'll say, I have no delight in this. The sun and light are going to be darkened, And in verse 3, things are going to tremble and strong men are going to stoop. You're going to lose your strength. And then, of course, work is going to be hard, as we see in verse 3. And the widows are going to lose their sight a little bit, or not just a little bit, quite a bit. And as we continue in verse 7, he ends by saying, and the dust returns to the earth as it once was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it, which I think is absolutely amazing, because he ends by saying, enjoy it while you're young, because as you get older, it's going to get hard. But by the way, at the very end, your spirit's going to return to God. So it's not the end of life. So this life, as it is the one time that we have to enjoy God. It is the one time to do what he has asked us to do. And that's why he summarizes in verse 13 of chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is all for humanity. Meaning, respect God, worship God, honor God, and his commands. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. In the end, you may think it's futile, but if you take this life and seize it, carpe diem, if you will, seize this life for the way that God intended, you will see eternity. You don't want to waste the time that you've got now. Don't look at it with a negative point of view. Look at it a positive point of view, because God is the one you're honoring. God is the one you're respecting. God is the one you're obeying. And in the end, he rewards you for it.